I was made a princess for saving the crown prince, and the empress personally arranged my marriage. The empress gently waved her sleeve and said, Li Cheng, the son of the Prince of Yang, is exceptionally handsome and unparalleled in horsemanship and archery. I think he would be a good match for you. Behind the beaded curtain, I looked up and gazed. Li Cheng stood before the hall, his demeanor exceptionally elegant and his bearing serene. His deep-set eyes, brimming with emotion, were like whirlpools that drew one into their depths. The empress spoke the truth, yet no one understood better than I what lay hidden in the depths of this gentle hostage's soul. In his previous life, he bided his time and endured patiently, turning the tide amidst the chaos, fighting his way back to the imperial court, and ultimately donning the yellow robe, marrying Li Cheng. In the future, I will be able to rely on his bravery and worldly talents to rise with the tide. Just like in my previous life, I will become the empress of the central palace, hold the phoenix seal, and serve as a motherly figure to the world. However, before the empress could ask again, I had already knelt down. I am willing to remain unmarried for life, serving by the empress's side. The empress was taken aback. I gently raised my eyes, and the crown prince sitting beside the empress also started in surprise. In my previous life, I met Li Cheng, the son of Prince Yang, at a garden banquet and fell in love at first sight. So, when the queen asked if there was a man I fancied, I confessed my girlish feelings to her. Now that the queen has arranged a marriage for me, I flatly refused. The queen was surprised and asked, "Have you thought it through?" I looked up at Li Cheng behind the beaded curtain. His upturned peach blossom eyes met mine, a flicker of surprise flashing in their depths. The empress pondered for a moment, only saying that I should think it over further and could report back in 3 months, as there was no need to rush. I knew that the empress was very willing to facilitate the marriage between me and the crown prince. The Prince of Yang was brave and warlike, holding significant military power, which troubled the emperor greatly. So, in my previous life, when I confessed to the empress that I wanted to marry the crown prince, she was overjoyed. Princesses have always been tools for maintaining stability since ancient times. I was granted the title of princess for saving the drowning crown prince when I was young. If a princess could be chosen for the crown prince before the empress speaks, it would prevent the princess under the empress's care from being drawn into the conflict. Thus, it can both soothe the emperor's heart and preserve the dignity of the Prince of Yang. I knew that refusing again would be futile, so I could only nod in agreement. But I was clear that no matter how much time passed, I would never choose to marry the heir, Li Cheng. As I walked behind the rockery in the imperial garden, I was stopped by Li Cheng. He stood as tall and straight as in his previous life, like a wall trapping me in the corner. Staying in the palace is a dead end. Zhao, you know that perfectly well. Why won't you come with me? I lowered my gaze, intending to pretend I had no connection with him, but unfortunately, Li Cheng remained as cunning and deep-thinking as he was in his past life. So it turns out, he has been reborn as well. I knew I couldn't hide it from him, so I looked up and met his gaze. He carried the familiar scent of grass and trees with a hint of bitterness. He backed me step by step against the mountain rocks, the stones digging painfully into my back. Why won't you marry me? You know, as long as you come with me, you will be the future empress. I can promise you. I will never depose an empress again. I looked into his deep-set eyes and said word by word, I refuse to marry again. He said with resentment, Li Zhao, after living a lifetime, you still remain so ungrateful. In my heart, I felt indifferent and helplessly sighed softly. Yes, I know you will be the ultimate winner in the future, but, Li Cheng, in this life, and for all eternity, no matter what position you attain, I will never marry you again. With those words, I slipped past him through the gap and walked out of the rockery. Behind me came the man's light chuckle. Are you truly willing to die a miserable death in the palace alongside that useless crown prince? Then I shall grant your wish. Zhao. Before I could even leave the plum garden, snow began to fall from the sky. The snowflakes, as large as goose feathers, settled on the heads of the palace servants and also in my hair. The snow-white flakes covered the young maiden's dark hair, and from a distance, it looked as if their hair had turned white. The maids laughed and chattered, saying how early the snow had come this winter. But as I watched the snowflakes on their dark hair, I lost myself in thought. Once, I too had dreamed of finding someone to share my heart with, to grow old together without parting. It's just a pity that, in the end, it was an empty dream after all. In my previous life, I married the heir, Li Cheng. As I had wished on our wedding night, I sat in the bedroom, filled with joy and shyness. It wasn't until late at night that the heir finally staggered in. Just as my heart was pounding like a drum, he hastily pulled off my bridal veil and then fell into a deep sleep, and I, whose mind was thrown into disarray by the frantic beating of my heart, did not miss the look in his peach blossom eyes, that boundless indifference. As a newlywed, I naively thought that the heir was exhausted from social engagements and had no interest in matters of the heart. Early the next morning, I cut my finger with a blade. Pretending it was the blood of a virgin. Li Cheng, who had just woken up, looked at me with nothing but disgust in his eyes. Suppressing the bitterness in my heart, I gave him a faint smile. Later, I often encountered the eunuch who was on his way to deliver letters to the palace at the prince's residence. With just a glance, I knew it was meant for the palace of the eldest princess. It was the season of orioles and flowers in March, and the envelope was adorned with a crabapple blossom tucked beside the temple. The crabapple bloomed delicately, and the eunuch delivering the letter took great care along the way, as if the petals were imbued with the longing of the sender. Later, it was heard that the empress had chosen a satisfactory consort for the eldest princess, none other than that year's top scholar. That night, Li Cheng drank himself into a stupor. He glared at me angrily, completely devoid of his usual gentleness. Princess, a girl born of a wet nurse is also fit to be sent into my prince's mansion as the princess consort. My father was utterly loyal to the court, utterly loyal. I stood frozen in place, the handkerchief I had intended to use to wipe his tears hanging motionless in mid-air. What the crown prince said was true. My mother had once been the crown prince's wet nurse. After her passing, the crown prince, taking pity on me for being orphaned, kept me in the Eastern Palace to raise me. Later, I happened to save the drowning crown prince, but ever since then, the crown prince developed a leg ailment. The Taoist priest said that I was the crown prince's benefactor, capable of protecting him through fire and water. The empress believed this wholeheartedly and immediately pleaded with the emperor to specially appoint me as a princess. It turned out that in the heart of the crown prince, the emperor granting me to him was actually a humiliation and a warning. I forcefully suppressed the bitterness in my heart, but I could no longer share a bed with him that night. I held my bedding and slept on the short couch in the outer room. Just as I was unsure how to handle the situation, the crown prince began returning to the mansion on time every day. Not only that, but he even started treating me gently again. It was as if he had returned to that year's garden banquet, once again the dashing and elegant prince of Yang's heir. Under the influence of a sweet fermented rice wine, I finally couldn't resist the tenderness of my beloved and fell drunk into his deep, peach blossom eyes. At that time, everyone in the capital knew that Li Cheng was the hostage sent to the capital by the Prince of Yang. Living an exceptionally difficult life, during one hunting expedition, he was accidentally shot in the shoulder by a prince and suffered a high fever that wouldn't break throughout the night. The servant sent to the palace to fetch the imperial physician had not returned for a long time. Watching my husband's forehead covered in cold sweat, my heart ached beyond measure. He raised his hand and gently wiped away the tears at the corner of my eye, his breath unsteady yet carrying a hint of reassurance. "What are you crying for? How could they bear to let me die? How foolish." For the next 8 years, grief and sweetness intertwined, indistinguishable from each other, I carefully navigated the complex web of relationships in the capital with the crown prince, striving to protect myself and proceeding with caution at every step. I had thought that I could spend my entire life with Li Cheng, growing old together without ever parting. However, news of the Prince of Yang's death suddenly reached the capital. It turned out that the emperor had never let down his guard against the Prince of Yang. When news of the Prince of Yang's sudden death reached the capital, I was combing the empress's hair at that time. The emperor was already old, yet he was unwilling to relinquish power. Years of suspicion between father and son had finally reached the point of rupture. The crown prince had raised an army. It was only later that I learned that Li Cheng had long been a follower of the crown prince. All these years, He had lain low in the capital, enduring humiliation and bearing heavy burdens, waiting for this very day. But what sent a chill down my spine even more was that the crown prince died in that coup, and Li Cheng emerged from the flames, holding the young child of the imperial clan. He followed the imperial edict to assist the young ruler, becoming the regent who held sway over the court. For over a decade, I stayed by his side, watching him emerge step by step from the storm of blood and violence. Late at night, while reviewing memorials, he occasionally glanced at me, his eyes still carrying a tenderness he hadn't yet withdrawn. So, I truly believed that, as time passed, he held some genuine affection for me, until one spring, the young emperor suddenly fell ill and passed away within 3 days. Later, Li Cheng ascended the throne as emperor on the day of his coronation. He stood on the city tower wearing the imperial robe, receiving the homage of thousands. A hostage prince had ultimately become the ruler of the world. That year, I naturally became the empress of the central palace, holding the phoenix seal. Yet it was also that year I became the only deposed empress in the Great Cheng dynasty. Not long after the empress's coronation ceremony, Li Cheng summoned the eldest princess into the palace. I intend to confer upon the eldest princess the title of noble consort. His words cut to the heart, his peach blossom eyes filled with the majesty of an emperor, yet also harboring endless affection for the eldest princess. At that time, the eldest princess had already married and had a consort. Yet, Li Cheng defied the world's disapproval, deliberately sabotaged the princess's marriage, and summoned her into the palace. Seeing my former husband so infatuated, my heart felt as if it were being cut by a knife. But the one sitting on the dragon throne was the king of the realm, no longer the husband who had accompanied me night after night. I nodded and personally oversaw the ceremony for the imperial consort's investiture. How could a princess raised in the lap of luxury by the Empress Dowager be content with merely being an imperial consort? Moreover, I, who sat on the throne as empress, was nothing more than a false princess born of a wet nurse. Soon, Li Cheng gave me 2 choices: either relinquish the position of empress to the eldest princess, I will be a noble consort alongside her. Seeing the evasion in his eyes, I suddenly laughed out loud. Li Cheng immediately furrowed his brows, his expression impatient. It's just asking you to step down from the position of empress. What's so difficult about that? The eldest princess has been proud and willful since childhood. You know that well enough. Why make things difficult for me? She never cared for managing the affairs of the inner palace anyway. From now on, the authority over the inner palace will still be in your hands. Every word he spoke was about the eldest princess's willfulness. But I understood it was clearly favoritism. The bitterness in my heart was beyond words. I could no longer smile. And I agreed without hesitation. A flicker of surprise flashed in his eyes. You're not angry with me? It seems he must have been prepared for me to cry and make a scene. I bowed to him respectfully. Your Majesty is the Son of Heaven. How dare I have any doubts? Another winter has come, and I have fallen gravely ill. Li Cheng does not know that on the day of the great chaos in the capital, I hid in the Empress's palace and suffered a miscarriage due to the fright. Moreover, with the new emperor ascending the throne, matters were complicated and chaotic, leaving no time for proper rest and recovery. I had thought that he and I had a long future ahead of us, and we would surely have more children. It's a pity that the emperor dotes solely on the eldest princess, and in my daily worries, I have ultimately dragged on until my lamp runs dry. The imperial physician said that I can only live through tis spring. On the day of the spring hunt, Li Cheng took the eldest princess to the royal hunting grounds. Upon hearing that I was unwilling to accompany them, he sneered coldly. She is still so jealous, truly unreasonable. I have long grown accustomed to his reprimands. My heart as cold as ashes. Outside the window, the crabapple petals fell softly, and I sat on the chaise longue, lost in thought. The emperor knew that the eldest princess loved crabapple blossoms, so he ordered them to be planted throughout the palace. The imperial gardens, the long streets, everywhere was adorned with crabapple trees, just so she could enjoy a beautiful view with every step. Just like the year I first married into the prince's mansion, every time the flowers bloomed, his letters to her always had a begonia tucked inside. My tears gently slipped down. People say that begonias have no fragrance. Lies. Whenever the orioles sing and flowers bloom in March, it always carries a bitter scent. I have finally exhausted my last ounce of energy before closing my eyes. I faintly heard hurried footsteps, someone crashing through the door, and the sound of armor hitting the ground. I struggled to open my eyes. It's Li Cheng. He was dressed in riding attire, as if he had rushed over from the hunting grounds. His chest heaved violently, sweat beaded at his temples, and the corners of his eyes were tinged with red. For a moment, it seemed as if I were 16 again. Seeing him for the first time in the palace, the imperial physicians knelt all around, but he only stared at me, his eyes filled with fear. He held my hand, trembling uncontrollably. Jiao, don't leave me, don't leave me, Jiao, don't leave me all alone. I forced a faint smile, my voice barely a whisper. Your Majesty is confused, you still have the noble consort, your Majesty has finally achieved your wish. As he finished speaking, his eyes reddened. The imperial physician trembled as he reported the details of my miscarriage and the delay in my treatment. His tears fell, scalding hot, almost burning the back of my hand. He was crying since he became the regent. I had never seen him cry throughout his life. He had always followed the eldest princess. Now, free from guilt toward me, he could at ease be with her as a perfect couple. Why should I cry again? Yet Li Cheng knelt by my bedside, his throat trembling as if choked with sobs. Jiao, my crown princess, it will always be you. Through all lifetimes, it will only be you. I let out a light laugh, tears disappearing into my hair. That year at the garden party, I stepped out from behind the curtain, the hem of my skirt brushing against fallen petals. He stood beneath the corridor, his profile illuminated by the lanterns, warm and smooth as jade. That moment of heart fluttering, I thought would last a lifetime. It turns out, it was just a calamity. Looking back on my life, I only wish that on that day, I had never met him. If there were another life, if I could have another chance. Tears fell. I would rather grow old and die within the palace walls. I would rather marry far away for the sake of peace. I would rather shave my head and become a nun, living out my remaining days with the dim light of an oil lamp and the ancient Buddha. I also never marry him again. To my surprise, in this life, before I could even get married, the Prince of Yang died. It is said that upon hearing the news of his father's death, the heir was overwhelmed with grief, shutting himself away for several days and refusing to participate in any social activities. In the previous life, he had been cautious and reserved due to his status as a hostage, striving to make the emperor and the court officials overlook his existence. Yet in the end, he still found himself in a desperate situation. This time, how could he be willing to sit and wait for death? He killed the King of Yang. I only exchanged a glance with him in the Eastern Palace, and it confirmed the thought in my heart. I have been with Li Cheng for over 10 years, witnessing how he went from a cautious hostage step by step to the position of a strategic emperor. I know him all too well. Rather than waiting to be killed, it's better to take the initiative and kill my father myself. Now, everyone in the capital praises his loyalty and filial piety. Even the old emperor silently nods in approval and has even begun to consider marrying the eldest princess to him. Another year of the garden tour. Li Cheng, dressed in white, appeared slender and delicate, with a faint trace of sorrow lingering between her brows. In this lifetime, even the willful and capricious eldest princess could not look away. No matter how Li Cheng disguised herself, the imposing aura of an emperor was not something ordinary noble youths could compare to. I had originally intended to slip away from the imperial garden for some leisure, but the eldest princess pulled me aside and teased me, asking why I had not yet married. I smiled and said, I only wish to serve Her Majesty the Queen in the palace. Her face flushed. She didn't forget to mock me. Indeed, with your background, how dare you even dream of it? Mother must have lost her mind to think of betrothing you to him. Although she said so, when the prince approached to inquire, she blurted out in a panic, it's a Jiao. She said Brother Cheng would also be at the garden party today, so she came specifically to see him. As soon as the words fell, Li Cheng strolled over, his gaze sweeping past me. He didn't speak, though in mourning, the corners of his eyes lifted slightly, as if smiling yet not. I quickly found an excuse and fled from this troublesome place. I was unaware that Crown Prince Li Heng was watching my retreating figure with a meaningful gaze in his eyes. Until the garden banquet was nearing its end, I remained hidden in the pavilion beside the rockery. Suddenly, footsteps sounded from behind me. Li Cheng came to a stop beside me, his eyes slightly lowered and his face filled with delight. "Ah Zhao, I knew it. You saying you didn't want to marry me was just words spoken in anger." I turned my face away, unwilling to look at him. "You need not flatter yourself, young master." After saying this, I tried to get up and leave, but he blocked my path. "As long as you are willing, once the mourning period is over, I will marry you. You will still be my princess consort." I subtly avoided his touch. "In this lifetime, I only wish for us to part ways peacefully, with no debts owed between us." Li Cheng was stunned. After a long while, he snorted lightly. "We have been together for 10 years, how can you say we owe each other nothing?" I was about to say something more when the voice of the princess came from beneath the rockery. "Brother Zheng, what are you doing here? Mother is calling you for tea." A flicker of tenderness flashed in Li Zheng's eyes, and without bidding me farewell, he turned and left. I also composed myself and stepped out of the pavilion. As the spring flowers faded, the envoy from the northern tribes entered the capital. They brought fine horses, sable furs, and a letter of marriage proposal. The envoy said that the new Khan had ascended the throne and wished to seek a princess from Darching in marriage. As a gesture of eternal alliance between the two nations, the old emperor was overjoyed. Originally, he had been unable to gauge the temperament of this new Khan, but now that the other party had taken the initiative to show goodwill, the emperor readily agreed. When I learned of this matter, I was in the empress's palace. Upon hearing these words, the empress no longer mentioned my marriage, and I understood most of it. There are only 2 princesses of marriageable age in the current dynasty. One is the eldest princess, and the other is me. After leaving the empress's palace, I encountered Li Cheng in the covered corridor. He stood beneath the eaves, dressed in dark robes. The spring breeze brushed against my face, tousling the hair on my forehead. A strand of black hair clung to the corner of my lips, which were tinted with rouge. I gently brushed it aside. He watched me from afar, his gaze intense, his voice low and hoarse. "Ah Zhao." That expression was all too familiar to me in my previous life. He loved to stroke my dark hair. Sometimes, even while reviewing memorials, he would twine the strands around his fingers. At such moments, he would always softly call my childhood name. I had no desire to speak further with this unruly man, yet he blocked my path. The afternoon sunlight in the corridor fell upon his handsome face, his pupils resembling the sunset beyond the frontier. Li Cheng's eyes held a faint smile. "The land of who is bitterly cold, with customs vastly different from the Central Plains. If you go, I fear you may never return. If you are unwilling, you may beg me. In this lifetime, I will never depose the empress." Ah Zhao. That confident demeanor made it seem as though everything was under his control. I gently lifted my head to meet his gaze. Why wouldn't I want to? Marrying the Khan would make me the only queen on the grasslands. I carefully observed his expression. He froze, the smile in his eyes vanishing instantly. Marrying the Khan means that after his death, you must marry the next Khan. For women from the Central Plains, this is difficult to accept, and at this moment, Li Cheng seems to finally realize, I would rather die than marry him. Before leaving the palace, the empress summoned me into her chambers, holding me as she shed tears. "Ah Zhao, you are also a child I have watched grow up. Mother is sorry for you. The women of the inner palace may appear glorious and boundless to outsiders, yet no one knows the bitterness within. Even as the empress, there are countless constraints beyond one's control." Yet Li Cheng always believed that ascending to the throne and granting me the position of empress was the ultimate desire of my life. On the day I left the palace, I sat in the carriage as the wheels rolled over the bluestone pavement, producing a clattering sound. The procession had just left the capital when it came to a halt. The eunuch escorting the carriage reported from outside the curtain, "Princess, it's the Crown Prince of Yang." I opened my eyes and lifted the curtain. Outside the city gate, he sat on horseback in the morning light, the corners of his eyes tinged with red. "Ah Zhao, why did you agree to the marriage alliance?" "I've said it before, I will not depose the empress. You are my only empress." The palace attendants all widened their eyes in shock. Li Cheng must have gone mad. He dismounted from his horse, and I dismissed the palace attendants. Li Cheng pressed forward step by step. Come back with me. Has the crown prince forgotten that our dynasty has only 2 marriageable princesses? If she is not the one to marry, then it must be me. I will protect both of you. I looked at his youthful face, which still carried an air of weariness. Li Cheng was still Li Cheng, as greedy as ever. He had never changed. My expression grew increasingly numb. Li Cheng was taken aback for a moment, then reached out to grab my hand. King Yang's army can capture the capital within 3 days. This time, the world will no longer belong to Da Cheng, but to Da Yang. Wait for me, will you? I lowered my gaze and gently withdrew my hand from his palm. Li Cheng. I raised my eyes and gazed into his pupils. Do you truly love the princess? For the sake of power, you are prepared to conquer cities and lands, slaughtering her entire family. Is that considered love? Trapping her beside the graves of her parents? He stood frozen in place, and I continued to say, you chased me out of the city gate, all because, in our past life, I gave you my whole heart, yet in this life, I would rather die than submit. You're just unwilling to accept it. Does that count as love? You don't love me, nor do you love the Grand Princess, Li Cheng. You only love yourself. You keep promising me the position of Empress, but do you remember? In our past life when I married you, you were nothing but a hostage in the old Emperor's hands, easily manipulated. Stop bothering me. While Li Cheng was still in a daze, I had already summoned the palace attendants. Before they could react, the poison needles hidden in my sleeves took their lives. Watching the attendants fall one by one, I untied the carriage's reins and rode off with the wind. 4 days. I had practiced martial arts day and night, waiting for the right moment to escape the palace. It just so happened that the Hu people came seeking a princess in marriage, which was a perfectly reasonable affair. I had originally planned to wait until the palace attendants were exhausted before making my move, but Li Cheng not only pursued me but also spoke so many absurd words. Fearing further complications, I had no choice but to act immediately. The spring rain fell incessantly, the raindrops dampening the dust and mingling with the fresh, earthy scent. Crabapple blossoms rustled to the ground, covering the earth. Li Cheng stood in place, letting the rain soak through his clothes. Gazing at the figure riding away into the distance, he murmured softly, I was sent as a hostage at the age of 6, and among rulers and subjects, parents and siblings, there was not a single person I could trust. Zhao, did I truly do wrong? 3 days later, chaos indeed erupted in the capital, but this time, the one who emerged from the flames was not Li Cheng, but Crown Prince Li Heng. The emperor had suddenly passed away due to a heart ailment, and Crown Prince Li Heng led troops to quell the rebellion, promptly ascending the throne as emperor. As for me, I hid at the foot of the imperial city and opened a steamed bun shop. After all, the most dangerous place is often the safest. Though this saying isn't always entirely true. One day, a young man dressed in luxurious clothes came to buy steamed buns. Before I could get a good look at him, I caught sight of the jade thumb ring on his hand and knew it was Li Heng. Zhao, my heart tightened, and I dared not look up at him. Fleeing from a marriage alliance was a grave crime of deceiving the emperor. Though I had no family to be implicated, my own life was still precious. He switched his cane to the other hand, picked up a steamed bun, took a bite, raised an eyebrow, and nodded. I never expected your skills to be this good. Come with me to the palace. I suddenly looked up. What, unwilling, indeed, having been Li Cheng's empress in your previous life. You must have grown weary of it. In this life, naturally, you refuse to become this solitary one's empress again. I widened my eyes and asked softly, will I be beheaded if I refuse? Li Heng chuckled softly. Even while fleeing, you didn't forget to send me a letter. How could I bear to kill you? Crown Prince Li Heng had been frail since childhood. With a reserved temperament, he had no playmates and seldom spoke. When I saved him as a child, we became inseparable from then on. I was his only companion, and he was my sole support in the palace. That was until the year of the garden banquet, when I met Li Cheng. A young girl's heart is hard to conceal, especially since Li Heng was a few years older than me. On the day of my coming-of-age ceremony in my previous life, he asked me if I had feelings for Li Cheng. I blushed deeply, only lowering my head in silence, naturally failing to see the disappointment in his eyes. It wasn't until just before my death in my previous life that I learned a secret from an old eunuch. The crown prince was not unaware of Li Cheng's schemes, but because Li Cheng was my husband, he hesitated to take action, allowing Li Cheng to seize the opportunity and bring him down. So in this life, before leaving the palace, I wrote down everything I knew into a booklet and sent it to the Eastern Palace to repay him for his affection toward me. I just never expected that Li Heng would also be reborn. The marriage alliance with the Hu people was something he had personally facilitated. He had already prepared a candidate, originally intending to have the wedding procession escort me to his private residence in Bianzhou, never imagining that I would directly kill my way out and flee. When the informant reported this to him, he was actually quite pleased. I never thought the little sister I watched grow up would be so brave and resourceful. As he spoke, the corners of his eyes turned red. I had thought that if you could stay with the one you love, it would be a beautiful thing. He had once vigorously promoted that marriage, but only after Li Heng's death in the previous life did he truly see the path I had walked. Those compromises made in humiliation, those tears secretly shed during the princess's coronation ceremony, those days and nights spent dragging my sick body through the cold, empty palace, waiting in vain for my husband's attention. He never knew that when I first fell in love, I too had felt a flutter for him. But ever since I understood the world, I knew there was a world of difference between myself and the crown prince. Whenever I grew a little closer to him, it would inevitably invite gossip from the concubines. Sometimes even I couldn't tell whether I liked Li Cheng more or simply longed to escape the palace. At this moment, he reached out to me, his eyes filled with longing. "Ah Zhao, come home. I no longer wish to entrust you to anyone else." I wanted to say I still had the steamed bun shop, but as I looked into his eyes, as if possessed, I placed my hand into his palm. On the day of the coronation ceremony, I wore the ceremonial robe and phoenix crown, ascending the red steps one step at a time. Thousands knelt and hailed me with cries of "Long live the Empress." Li Heng stood high above, waiting for me. When he took my hand, he gently tightened his grip. "Ah Zhao, let me protect you." I lowered my gaze with a faint smile and gently squeezed his hand in return. In the Empress's palace, the owner's thoughtfulness was evident everywhere. The courtyard was planted with water lilies I loved as a child. The cabinets were filled with the storybooks I enjoyed reading. And even the table was set with my favorite osmanthus and gorgon fruit cakes. Lifting the bedspread, I found peanuts and lotus seeds spread underneath. A wave of warmth flooded my heart, as comforting as sitting by a warm stove in winter. So this is what it feels like to be cherished by someone in my past life. On our wedding night, Li Cheng simply slept without saying a single word to me. I made excuses for him 1,000 times, pondered his feelings 1,000 times, but never understood. In truth, how could someone who is loved not know? Just like now, Li Heng, who had been quiet and reserved since childhood, drank a few cups of wine, his eyes reddening at the corners, his voice trembling. "Zhao Zhao, every day of this life, I fear it's just a dream. I'm afraid I'm just a wandering soul. Afraid I can't protect you, afraid you'll fall back into those nightmares of being let down." I had thought that since we grew up together, this moment should feel awkward, but his words brought tears to my eyes. The dungeon was damp and musty, with a faint smell of mildew lingering in the air. Li Cheng had long lost track of how many days he had been confined here, the dim surroundings blurring the boundaries between day and night. Sometimes, by the flickering candlelight, he would catch glimpses of their wedding day. Ah Zhao sitting upright by the bedside, her hands tightly clasped, the light makeup unable to conceal the shyness in her eyes. She lowered her gaze, her lips slightly pursed, softly calling his name. He reached out, but the vision vanished in an instant. When he looked up again, only the cold, hard walls remained. After what felt like an eternity, he saw Ah Zhao again. This time, she was standing beneath the corridor of the mansion, her brows furrowed as if troubled by something. The sunlight fell upon her face, illuminating her worries with stark clarity. When had Ah Zhao started frowning so often? She had been so joyful when she married him. They had been husband and wife for over a decade, yet the painful memories far outnumbered the sweet ones. Because of his precarious status, even Ajao was looked down upon by the noblewomen, yet she never complained to him. He suddenly remembered how Ajao often hosted those women at their home. She had always disliked socializing, yet she would say, "The crown prince's position is difficult, it's not wise for him to actively seek alliances. As a woman, I am less likely to draw the emperor's attention." She was a princess raised by the empress herself, cherished by the crown prince, and marrying him had clearly been a compromise. Back then, he had vowed never to let his wife suffer disrespect again, to make her the most honored woman in the world. Later, he truly achieved that. Power fueled his ambitions, and he grew increasingly adept at being an emperor, yet also increasingly greedy, even desiring to marry the long-lost princess he had never obtained. He knew Ajao might be hurt, but he was certain she would never leave him. After all, they had been through so much together, and Ajao had never given up on him. It was her love that had allowed his neglect and his harm. It wasn't until news of her impending death reached him at the hunting grounds that he was struck with terror. Who was he without Li Jiao? Taken as a hostage at 6, distrusted by his parents and brothers, suspected by the emperor and his ministers, he had long stopped trusting anyone. Only Ajao truly understood his pettiness and wretchedness. It was only when she died before his eyes that he realized the cowardice had always been his own. After ascending the dragon throne, he grew increasingly afraid to look into Ajao's eyes, fearing he would see his past self, and even more afraid of seeing the Ajao who loved Li Cheng. Tears fell from his eyes, and in a daze, he saw her standing before him once more, murmuring softly, "Ajao." Suddenly, a sharp reprimand cut through the air. "How dare you? The Empress's name is not for you to call so." Casually, the Empress, she married Li Heng. Li Cheng froze, his mind completely blank in an instant. When the Grand Princess came to plead with me, I lowered my gaze to look at her. The once proud woman was now in tears, begging me to put in a good word for Li Cheng with the Emperor. "Empress, please spare his life." She bowed to me, the gilded crabapple hairpin in her hair looking as vivid as life. In the previous life, Li Cheng had defied all the officials to marry her. In this life, she was pleading for his life before the person she had always looked down upon the most. They truly were a perfect match. I mentioned this to Li Heng, and he turned over to look at me, his tone tinged with annoyance. "Ajao wants me to spare him." I rested my head on his arm. "Your sister is so heartbroken. Don't you feel for her?" He turned away with a light snort, and I continued on my own. "Though he doesn't love me, he treats the princess consort very well. I hate him, but I know you care for your sister." He shot me a glare. "In troubled times, the first to go are those with a merciful heart like yours," I retorted angrily. "Then tomorrow, let's drag him to the execution ground and let the princess consort cry her eyes out. Since she looks down on me anyway, it's better to have no hope left. Since I'm not allowed to be a bodhisattva, I'll be a yaksha instead." He turned over and ignored me. Li Cheng was demoted to a commoner and exiled to the southern barbarian lands. Before he left, I once asked the princess consort, "I ask once more, if the princess follows Li Cheng, she will become a commoner. Are you still certain you wish to go?" The princess's gaze was resolute. "Yes, I am willing to follow Li Cheng for the rest of my life." I nodded, tugged at the corner of my mouth, and waved in farewell. It was once again the season of lush grass and singing orioles. As I strolled through the palace, there was no longer the bitterness of memory, only the faint, elusive fragrance of lotus. Time flows, and in the blink of an eye, more than 10 years have passed. As he grew older, the emperor's leg ailment frequently recurred, so he often stayed overnight in my palace. With the lessons from my past life in mind, I was prepared for Li Heng to have a multitude of wives and concubines. But his heart was never in the harem. Apart from the 2 princes I bore him, there were no other children. Whenever I listened to the Empress Dowager's complaints, I couldn't help but want to vent my own grievances, but he would close his eyes and pretend not to hear. When I grew too insistent, he would simply say, "I have already died once. I have no interest in romantic entanglements anymore, nor do I wish to have a bunch of children and invite disputes." Thus, I stopped trying to persuade him. Another dozen or so years passed in a flash. and white hair began to appear at my temples. The Princess Royal, however, sent a carrier pigeon message, saying she had already separated from Li Cheng and wished to return to the capital. Upon hearing this news, the women in the palace could not help but mock, saying that the princess, having been pampered since childhood and unable to endure hardship, had abandoned her husband and fled back to the capital. Why had she put on such a show of deep affection in the first place? But I knew that although the Princess Royal was willful, she was also loyal and righteous. After entering the palace, she came to find me at the first opportunity. After more than a decade in exile, her face was no longer as radiant as it once had been, and due to neglect, it had even lost its luster compared to the palace maids. Before I could speak, she pulled out a dagger and charged at me. The palace maid, quick as lightning, immediately restrained her. Over the years, Li Heng, fearing I might encounter danger again, had ensured that every maid by my side was highly skilled. Still shaken, I watched as she screamed at me like a madwoman, "I want to kill you, I want to kill you." I looked down at her with disdain. "Why do you hate me? If you knew his heart only belonged to you, why did you let me go with him? On our wedding night, he only called out your childhood name. He never even returned to our room, staying day and night in the study, not allowing me to come near. For over a decade, I never knew that the entire baskets of paintings and calligraphy in the study were all portraits of you, from spring to winter, from a young child to a maiden. Even images of you in old age. If your heart belongs to another, why did you marry me? If your heart belongs to another, why did you say those words in the Imperial Garden?" Tears streamed down her deeply lined face. "That year in the Imperial Garden, we met by the rockery, and you laughed, saying you had opened your heavenly eye, as if we were a destined pair in our past lives. Li Cheng, you have caused me such suffering." After listening to her mad words, I could only remain silent. Just as Li Cheng had said in our past life, the eldest princess was proud and willful, yet also innocent and lively, but she didn't understand a man's heart is something even he himself may not fully grasp, so how could it ever be clearly explained? When the news of Li Cheng's death arrived, the princess went mad. The informant said that Li Cheng had died by poison, and on the desk in the study was left a letter. When the palace servant presented it, I lowered my eyes and saw the yellowed envelope. Inscribed to a Jiao, to be opened personally. The lotus pattern on the envelope was vivid and lifelike. I closed my eyes, and a faint fragrance of lotus seemed to linger in my breath. "Your Majesty, the Empress, take it and burn it." The imperial physician said that with the rising yang energy in spring, more movement would be beneficial for the emperor's leg ailment. "Ah Jiao, would you like to take a walk to the Western Hills?" I took a bite of the orange he handed me and looked up. Upon hearing this, the Western Hills, my hand paused for a moment. Everyone knows that the wild crabapple blossoms on West Mountain bloom with unrestrained and brilliant beauty. The emperor, like an ordinary husband, wanted to take his wife to admire the flowers. I looked into his eyes and nodded. "All right. The crabapple blossoms on West Mountain truly bloom exceptionally well. Unlike the neatly trimmed ones in the Imperial Garden, the crabapple trees here are wild, covering the mountains and fields with pink, white, and light red blossoms that stretch from the foot of the mountain to halfway up the slope, like a snowfall that never melts." Li Heng held my hand as we slowly walked up the mountain. We found a rock halfway up the slope to sit on. Gazing at the sea of crabapple blossoms covering the mountain, he turned his head to look at me. "How about it? Exquisite. How is its fragrance? Has your Majesty grown so old and confused that you no longer know the crabapple has no scent?" His eyes brimmed with tender affection. "In this world, many people and matters are not inherently important. It is only when we care that we become troubled. When your heart is stirred, you naturally overlook the true essence of the crabapple blossom." I recall in my past life, lying on my sickbed, I repeatedly asked the palace maid, "Can you smell the bitterness of the crabapple blossoms in the courtyard?" I did not smell it. Even before I breathed my last, that bitterness was stuck in my throat. Neither rising nor falling, the wind lifted the hair at my temples, tickling as it brushed across my cheeks. Leaning against his shoulder, I took a deep breath. The wind blew up from the valley, carrying with it the fragrance of flowers that filled the mountains and fields. It's sweet, I said. He was taken aback for a moment. I looked up, gazing into his eyes. Begonia. It's sweet. The first story ends here. Don't go away, the next story is even more exciting. I am the most beautiful woman in the capital. I was summoned to the palace by imperial decree to participate in the selection of consorts, and the emperor took a liking to me at first sight. The imperial consort, who holds the highest favor in the harem, glanced down at me with an air of arrogance, relying on beauty to please others. How long can it last? You're nothing more than a plaything. The emperor will grow tired of you soon enough. I lowered my head gently, my shoulders trembling slightly. She thought I was afraid. Little did she know, I was excited that she hadn't recognized me. Excitedly, I have already sharpened my murderous blade, and the time has finally come for it to taste blood. After the young Miss Shen, whom I had served since childhood, tragically died in a desolate temple, Madame Shen took me in as her adopted daughter in an instant. I rose from being a maid to becoming the only young lady of the Shen family. My name is Shen Wanyue. Many people envy my good fortune, and some even suspect that I secretly harmed Miss Shen in order to take her place. I neither argue nor pay attention to such talk. Instead, I focus solely on learning the etiquette and demeanor of a noble lady from the palace maids invited by Mrs. Shen. As I grew older, my striking appearance often attracted the pursuit of many distinguished young men at poetry gatherings and banquets, including those from noble families and even the royal clan, but I paid no attention to any of it. Instead, I secretly hired the most famous courtesan in the capital to teach me the arts of the bedchamber, how to seduce and enchant, and how to understand a man's heart day after day, without fail, rain or shine. I studied with utmost dedication, until the courtesan, Lady Song, had nothing left to teach me. She praised me as her most outstanding student and expressed some curiosity about me. Miss Shen, with your noble status and being the #1 beauty in the capital, I am truly curious about what kind of man would require you to go to such lengths. Hearing this, I raised my eyes to look at the stunningly beautiful features in the mirror and smiled with a slight curve of my lips. Naturally, he is no ordinary man. He is, after all, the Supreme Emperor. Lady Song was taken aback for a moment before saying, but as everyone knows, the emperor dotes exclusively on the imperial consort. He once promised her a lifetime of devotion, and for many years, he has not only neglected the other palace consorts but has also never selected new beauties for the harem. Miss Shen, do you intend to wait indefinitely? Yes, the emperor and his consort's deep affection is known throughout the land, but a lifetime of devotion between one man and one woman in the imperial family is already as difficult as climbing to the heavens. Moreover, even if His Majesty truly keeps his promise, within the harem, I chuckled softly, though my eyes held a cold indifference. It is not only His Majesty and the imperial consort. Half a month later, the day of the selection was approaching. The Empress Dowager personally issued an edict, summoning all eligible daughters of officials of the 5th rank and above to enter the palace for the selection. I was also on the list. Lady Song asked me how I had foreseen everything so accurately. I smiled and said, because the imperial consort has no son. In the depths of the palace, the emperor can certainly be affectionate, but he absolutely must not be without an heir unless he is willing to hand over the empire to someone else. But even if he is willing, the Empress Dowager would never stand by and watch the emperor truly have no heir. Therefore, it was inevitable for the young ladies to enter the palace. No one could stop it. On the night I entered the palace, I had a dream. I dreamt of the last day I saw the young lady. That day, we walked arm in arm to Lingyan Temple to offer incense and pray for blessings. Facing the deities, I was listless, yet she was filled with devotion. I asked her what she had prayed for. Was it for a good marriage? She gave me a playful, reproachful look, then tied the prayer pouch she had obtained around my waist. As for me, I naturally prayed to the Bodhisattva to protect you for a lifetime, ensuring your peace, smoothness, joy, and well-being. Under the bright sun, her face was radiant, her eyes filled with tenderness for me. She said, I am the older sister, and it's only natural for an older sister to protect her younger sister. She has always been a woman of her word, so when we encountered bandits on the way back to the mansion, she desperately hid me in the secret chamber beneath her. She refused to move even until death. Warm blood dripped on me through the cracks. I looked up and saw her still gentle gaze. The villains were tormenting her, and though she was clearly on the verge of death, she smiled and said to me, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." I don't know how much time had passed. A light, brisk footstep sounded outside the desolate temple. The woman, dignified and elegant with her hair tied high in a bun, looked down at the young lady who had long since lost her breath and smiled. "Shinkia, it seems you, the female lead, don't have any golden finger either. You still died in such an ugly way." The woman's smile was as venomous and eerie as a snake. I suddenly woke up. Only then did I realize my face was covered in tears. Lady Shin was sitting by the bed, looking at me with deep concern. "You, let's not enter the palace anymore." "Okay, no." I pushed away her handkerchief, firm and resolute. "Mother, I live only for revenge. Since the imperial concubine has killed the young lady, I will kill her. Only then will it be fair." Outside the selection hall, the candidates were lined up in the palace corridor, plump or slender, each with myriad talents. Yet the emperor sat listlessly on his high throne, not a single one catching his eye. The selection of the candidates who kept their plaques was all decided by the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager routinely asked me if I had studied, and which of the arts, music, chess, calligraphy, or painting I excelled in. At that moment, the emperor suddenly spoke up. "Are you Shen Wanyue, the maid who became the adopted daughter of the Shen family after the young lady's death?" Everyone knows about this. Yet the emperor deliberately brought it up. He wants to embarrass me. Looking at the emperor's teasing gaze, he seems to be anticipating how I will react, whether I will flee in shame or burst into tears of humiliation. Yet, I meet his eyes and smile slightly, saying, "Your Majesty actually recognizes me, your humble subject. I am truly overwhelmed by your favor." Such playful words. No one had ever dared to speak to the emperor like that. The emperor was clearly taken aback for a moment, then snorted coldly, looking me up and down. "I've heard you are the #1 beauty in the capital. In my opinion, you are not even 1/10 as beautiful as the imperial consort." That remark was cutting, yet I merely blinked, as if failing to grasp his malice, my almond-shaped eyes gleaming with a clear, innocent light, and said, "This humble girl is but a willow's grace, of course no match for the noble consort's peerless beauty. Yet even so, the willow has its own willow-like charm. To be honest with your Majesty, I often gaze at my reflection in the mirror and marvel at the fine features my parents bestowed upon me. Humble yet neither subservient nor arrogant." The emperor chuckled with an ambiguous meaning and then fell silent, as if he had lost interest in me. However, the Empress Dowager noticed that he was no longer as disinterested and lazy as before, and she spoke up with a smile. "Miss Shen has a lively personality and a lovely appearance, full of vitality. What do you think, your Majesty?" The emperor glanced at me indifferently before finally speaking, then let her keep the token. Before the words had even finished, a palace maid suddenly rushed in from outside the hall, shouting, "Your Majesty, the imperial consort is having a heart palpitation." As soon as these words were spoken, the emperor abruptly stood up and strode outside, but as he passed by me, he suddenly paused and said, "Shen Wuyue, then let her be titled Lady Moon." This was the only instance in this selection where the emperor personally bestowed a title. I lowered my head meekly, concealing the fleeting smile at the corner of my mouth. Everyone knows that the imperial consort enjoys boundless favor from the emperor. When the emperor first ascended the throne, he was assassinated at the hunting grounds and was saved by the imperial consort, who was then a horse trainer. The two secretly fell in love. Upon returning to the palace, the emperor's first act was to depose the empress and appoint the imperial consort as the new empress. But he faced unanimous opposition from both the court and the harem. The empress has done nothing wrong. How can she be easily deposed? Moreover, the imperial consort's family background is truly lowly. The emperor had no choice but to grant her the title of imperial consort. Since the imperial consort was injured and unable to bear children, the emperor forbade other concubines from having children. This is an immense favor from heaven. If this were among the common people, the populace might praise it as deep affection. But in the royal family, It is considered foolish and absurd. Many among the common people view the imperial consort as a seductive concubine akin to Daiji or Bao Sai. This selection of concubines is not only forced by the Empress Dowager but also for the sake of the noble consort's reputation. The noble consort, knowing this, would step back, but she would never truly settle down and allow the selection to proceed smoothly. At the selection ceremony, after the emperor was lured away by the noble consort under the pretense of illness, the Empress Dowager was so angry that her face turned pale. When her gaze fell upon me, she said with deep meaning, "Noble lady, you were personally appointed by His Majesty, so you shall reside in the Jade Flower Palace. Your Majesty has few heirs, so it is your duty, noble consort, to share his worries. If anything happens, I will protect you." The Jade Flower Palace is separated by only a single wall from the Emerald Palace where the noble consort resides. The Empress Dowager has truly gone to great lengths to ensure I can captivate the Emperor, yet I cannot truly believe that she will protect me at present. The Emperor might have some interest in me, but if I were to resort to schemes and deliberately oppose the imperial consort, not only would I fail to win the Emperor's favor, but I would also risk incurring his displeasure. At that point, if the imperial consort wanted to deal with me, it would be effortless, and the Empress Dowager would not risk displeasing the Emperor for the sake of a disfavored concubine. I am not a fool, so what I am waiting for is an opportunity, and this opportunity came quickly. The noble consort and His Majesty had a late-night argument, and the noble consort drove His Majesty out of Kuei Palace. His Majesty was now storming toward the imperial garden. Upon hearing the news, I took the things I had prepared long ago, took a small path, and entered the imperial garden. In the imperial garden, the Emperor wore a cold expression, taking large strides. The palace maids followed behind, trembling and not daring to make a sound. Even their breathing was much quieter at that moment. I emerged from the bushes and, upon seeing the Emperor, my face lit up with joy. "Your Majesty, what are you doing here?" The Emperor's brows furrowed tightly, yet, as if I hadn't noticed, I suddenly realized, "I understand now. Your Majesty must also be here to see the fireflies." "Fireflies?" I nodded and raised the flowers and plants in my hand to him. "If there are firefly grass in the palace, there will naturally be fireflies." The Emperor was astonished. This was the first time he had discovered it as well. I smiled and explained, "My maternal grandfather's family practices medicine, and I have also learned a bit about herbs and incense making." The Emperor's face was cold, and seeing a few blades of grass hanging from the strands of hair on my shoulder, he couldn't help but show a hint of amusement. "Is this why you couldn't sleep so late at night?" I seemed to blush shyly, but instead of explaining, I approached the Emperor. Eunuch Wang wanted to stop me, but the Emperor waved him away. "I see some dark circles under your Majesty's eyes. It must be because you haven't slept well lately. Is something troubling you?" I asked with a calm and straightforward tone. The Emperor sighed helplessly. "You are trying to guess my intentions, which is a major taboo in the palace." I wrinkled my nose but disagreed. "What's wrong with that? Before entering the palace, my mother told me that I am your Majesty's woman, part of the family, so what's wrong with me caring about my own husband?" It was said so naturally and directly, yet it made the Emperor pause for a moment. He stared at me with a deep gaze and chuckled meaningfully. "Part of the family?" I nodded heavily. She added, "Your Majesty, please follow me. I will bring the calming incense for you, ensuring you have a restful night's sleep." With that, I began walking toward the Jade Flower Palace. However, the Emperor did not follow. I turned back to look at him, my eyes filled with confusion, as if questioning why he wasn't coming along. After a moment, the Emperor followed. I walked and talked along the way. The Emperor rarely responded, yet the frown between his brows seemed to ease a little. My steps even felt a bit lighter. Seeing Eunuch Wang unconsciously let out a sigh of relief, a faint smile crossed the corner of my mouth. Upon arriving at Yuhua Palace, I fetched some calming incense for the Emperor and then bowed to bid him good night. The Emperor looked somewhat surprised. "Aren't you going to ask me to stay?" I paused for a moment, my smile deepening. "Your Majesty, I believe you are tired and need to rest." He raised an eyebrow slightly, glanced at me, then turned and left. Just before stepping out of the palace gate, he suddenly said, If the calming incense doesn't work, I will come back to punish you." My eyelashes curved slightly. "Yes, your humble consort respectfully welcomes your majesty." At the palace gate, I silently watched his figure gradually fade into the distance, like a wife deeply in love with her husband, but before reaching the corner, Consort Wang suddenly bumped into the emperor's embrace, shyly and timidly leading him into her own palace. Upon seeing me, she snorted coldly, her eyes filled with disdain. "How foolish, not knowing to seize the opportunity when His Majesty is right before you. What use is it to win the Empress Dowager's favor? Just a pretty embroidered pillow, nothing more." I smiled faintly, offering no rebuttal. But as I turned away, my face turned icy cold, not a trace of a smile left in this imperial harem. Fools are always particularly abundant. The next day, news of Lady Wang receiving the emperor's favor spread throughout the harem. The Empress Dowager conferred upon her the title of noble lady and bestowed generous rewards upon her. For a time, she became the most favored concubine in the harem. Though she prided herself on her superior family background, she had been overshadowed by me during the selection process and held a deep-seated resentment toward me. She often treated me with cold disdain and sarcasm. Seeing my skill in embroidery, she even demanded that I embroider a pouch for her. She treats me as if I were a mere embroiderer. If I refuse, she only becomes more determined to make things difficult for me. On this day, when I delivered the embroidered pouch to her, it was already late in the evening. My trusted confidant, Huaizhu, said indignantly, "She is so arrogant, Your Highness. Must we really endure this in silence?" "Of course not." I rubbed my sore wrist and suddenly smiled. "So, she won't live much longer." The next day, when paying respects, noble Lady Wang was late. While the rarely seen imperial consort hurriedly arrived, her features were as delicate as an orchid, her skin as fair as warm jade, graceful and slender, like a frail beauty from the west. Without saying a word, she could evoke pity. Yet I noticed a few specks of bloodstains on her moon-white skirt. She sighed, appearing quite frightened. Just now, Lady Wang was likely too exhausted from receiving favor and lost her mind. Attempting to intercept my carriage, she nearly caused me to fall, which delayed my visit to pay respects to Your Majesty. But rest assured, Your Majesty, I have already ordered her execution." She gently waved her hand, and a line of palace attendants carried a person and threw them outside the hall. There lay Lady Wang, who had been basking in glory just yesterday, now lying on the ground covered in blood and flesh, utterly lifeless. All the concubines present were terrified, their faces pale and trembling with fear. The Empress Dowager angrily smashed the cup in her hand to the ground. "Imperial consort, you have quite the audacity." But at that moment, the Emperor strode in and stood protectively in front of the Imperial consort. "Mother, what are you doing?" The Empress Dowager pointed at the corpse on the ground. "Emperor, take a good look at what your Imperial consort has done." The Emperor furrowed his brow tightly. "What is this?" Upon hearing this, the Imperial consort immediately shed her earlier arrogance, her expression sorrowful as tears fell. "Your Majesty, noble Lady Wang has shown disrespect toward me." The pouch at her waist was embroidered with peonies. "Not only did she overstep her bounds, but she also said that my beauty has faded, and that you only smile at the new while ignoring the tears of the old." In a moment of rage, I struck her. "But I never expected, she actually died, a beauty shedding tears." The Emperor naturally had to console her. "Noble Lady Wang was disrespectful to you. If she died, then she died." He then turned to the Empress Dowager and said, "Mother, noble Lady Wang's grave disrespect warranted death. The Imperial consort manages the 6 palaces, and dealing with the Imperial concubines is part of her duties. Please do not be angry." The Empress Dowager's face turned pale with anger. "Your Majesty, you have truly lost your mind." With that, she turned and headed back to the palace. Clearly, she was deeply angered. The Emperor intended to chase after her. The Imperial consort, however, took his hand. "Your Majesty, my heart aches." Her delicate brows furrowed slightly, her expression filled with certainty of the Emperor's favor, and the Emperor, naturally, would not disappoint her. He comforted her with tender affection. The concubines departed one after another. As I passed by noble Lady Wang, I discreetly glanced at the pouch dangling precariously at her waist. Under the bright sun, the silver thread-embroidered peony had long been soaked through with blood, yet it appeared even more vibrant. My eyelashes curved slightly as I smiled softly. "Noble Lady Wang, don't blame me, I was merely seeing you off. I know Lady Wang will surely wear the pouch I embroidered, intending to humiliate me, so I embroidered peonies with silver thread and then covered them with gauze thread. The silver thread peonies are only visible in sunlight. Peonies are the king of flowers. For a noble lady like Wang to use it would be an act of overstepping her bounds, a sign of arrogance born of favoritism, and how could the imperial consort, who already harbored deep resentment towards her for breaking the emperor's promise of a lifelong commitment to just the two of them, ever tolerate her? I had hoped to witness a good show of dogs biting each other, but I never expected that the imperial consort, who had always been known for her benevolence in the palace, would personally have noble Lady Wang beaten to death. The imperial consort was certain the emperor would not blame her, and indeed, the emperor favored her greatly, even when she killed a concubine. He simply coaxed her. However, the consort failed to notice the emperor's disgust as he looked at the corpse, nor the hint of scrutiny that appeared in his eyes, which were otherwise filled with affection for her. Yes, how could his beloved, who was as pure and kind as a white lotus in the emperor's heart, possibly kill and stain her hands with blood? If her hands were stained with blood, it must surely be someone else's fault. If you're wrong, you should be punished. So, noble Lady Wang died, and that's that. No one cares. But is a blood-stained white lotus still a white lotus? This imperceptible crack, of course, could not destroy the emperor's love for the imperial consort. Therefore, what I must do is to widen the crack. After this incident, the imperial consort and the emperor reconciled as if nothing had happened. The emperor no longer paid any attention to the concubines filling the palace and courtyards, spending his days solely with the noble consort. Yet the empress dowager could no longer tolerate the noble consort. Using the pretext of worshipping Buddha, she took the noble consort to Lingyan Temple, and it would be at least half a month before they returned to the palace. Without the noble consort, the imperial consorts fought tooth and nail to win the emperor's favor. The imperial garden and palace pathways were filled with concubines vying for attention with their dazzling beauty. Yet I remained quietly in the Yuhua Palace, focusing only on my own affairs. I rarely even stepped beyond the palace gates that day. I was carefully blending a new incense when a deep voice suddenly came from above me. So focused. "What incense are you making?" I looked up. Only then did I realize that the emperor had entered at some point and was looking down at me. My eyes lit up, and I presented the incense to the emperor as if seeking praise, explaining, "I heard from Sister Lianpin that your majesty has been suffering from frequent headaches lately. I once heard from my grandfather that this jade pot pear incense can provide some relief, so I prepared some for your majesty. If you light a stick before resting, it should help soothe the headache. I am beautiful. Lady Song says that when I smile, I resemble peach blossoms on a branch, beautiful and radiant, and I know even better which curve, which angle makes me look even more beautiful." Seeing the fleeting flash of admiration in the emperor's eyes, my smile deepened, yet my gaze remained as innocent as a child's. The emperor looked at me deeply and said, "You have put quite some thought into pleasing me. I like your majesty." I blinked and said it as if it were the most natural thing. "Your majesty is the most handsome and majestic person I have ever seen. Of course I like you. As an emperor, appearance is the least important thing. But who would dislike a beautiful young girl's praise of themselves? The emperor is no different." The emperor was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and tapped my forehead. "Smooth talker." He took the incense and left the Yuhua Palace. As evening fell, Eunuch Wang walked into the Yuhua Palace with a smile. "Your Highness, His Majesty has chosen your name for tonight. Please prepare quickly." Huaizhu was overjoyed and immediately instructed the palace maids to prepare everything. She soaked in a bath filled with flower petals. I gazed at the reflection in the water, a smile creeping up to the corners of my eyes like a venomous serpent, sinister yet captivating. Imperial consort, the grand performance is finally about to begin. The night I received the emperor's favor, the candlelight was dim. I gently raised my hand and hooked it around the emperor's neck, my soft red lips brushing lightly against his ear. beneath my fingertips, the man's temperature grew increasingly feverish, and the sound of his breathing against my neck grew rougher and more ragged, yet I pushed him away, feign retreat to lure the enemy in, pretend to refuse only to welcome him closer. This is what Lady Song taught me. The Emperor's gaze grew even more profound, his eyes fixed intently on me, as if a fire were burning deep within them. This should be enough. I leaned in and kissed his cheek, my face flushed crimson, my eyes timid and innocent, both pure and naive. Your Majesty. The Emperor seemed unable to bear it any longer, turning over and pinning me beneath him, his fingertips, calloused and rough, traced across my cheek. You are truly beautiful. My smile deepened. She threw herself into his arms, whispering softly, "Then what is your Majesty waiting for? Your servant is your woman." That night, we kept going until midnight. The Emperor was still in high spirits. He didn't stop until the sky began to lighten. I felt like I had only rested for a few hours before I vaguely heard the voice of Eunuch Wang. Opening my eyes again, I saw the Emperor had already risen and was dressing, preparing to attend the morning court. I quickly got up. "Your Majesty, allow me to assist you." The Emperor's voice was hoarse. "You may sleep a little longer." I shook my head, feeling a wave of weakness as soon as I got out of bed, but I forced myself to walk over to him. "I wish to serve your Majesty." Seeing my insistence, the Emperor said nothing more, only his eyes grew even gentler, as if he had developed feelings for me. But not long after he left, Eunuch Wang brought a bowl of pitch-black medicine. "Noble consort, this is the fetal stabilizing medicine personally bestowed by His Majesty." I sneered inwardly, but on the surface, I remained gentle and obedient, drinking down the so-called fetal stabilizing medicine in one gulp. Oh, Emperor, so deeply affectionate yet so heartless, deeply affectionate towards the imperial consort, so affectionate that, unwilling to see her sad, he forbade other concubines from bearing children. As for us, he was heartless to the extreme. After that day of favor, the Emperor had my nameplate turned over for 7 consecutive days during the day. After court, the Emperor also enjoyed coming to my palace to sit for a while. Sometimes reading, sometimes playing chess with me, or sitting by my side watching me make incense. I always spoke a lot, while he rarely responded, yet the atmosphere was warm. Within 3 months of entering the palace, my rank rose from noble lady to concubine, personally bestowed by His Majesty. It was a favor unique to me. Aside from the noble consort, overnight, I became the most favored concubine in the harem. On the day the noble consort returned to the palace, I was dining with His Majesty. "Your Majesty, this fish is fragrant and refreshing, please have a taste." Before the words had even finished, the imperial consort walked in with a smile. "Your Majesty, I have returned." But as her gaze fell upon me, her expression changed slightly, and she snorted coldly. "It seems I have come at an inopportune time, disturbing your Majesty's pleasant affairs." Such words were bold, but the Emperor did not blame her. Instead, he rose with a smile and took her hand, saying, "Nonsense again, I've been missing you too much to wait." At this moment, the Emperor had eyes only for the imperial consort. The two sat down together, speaking intimately. I could neither interject nor blend in. I know, this is the imperial consort deliberately trying to embarrass me, yet I felt neither joy nor anger. Simply standing quietly to the side, neither disturbing nor making a sound, until the Emperor remembered me and casually waved his hand. "Consort, you may withdraw first." I nodded meekly, seeing that the Emperor had dismissed me so easily. The imperial consort grew even more pleased. Before the mockery could even reach her eyes, the Emperor suddenly spoke again. "In a few days, I will come to see you again." My eyes lit up slightly, and I gently revealed a faint smile, as if overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. "Yes, I humbly welcome your Majesty. These days of companionship have not been in vain after all." The imperial consort narrowed her eyes slightly. As she brushed past me, her voice was barely audible, a mere plaything relying on beauty to please others. "Once His Majesty tires of playing, how long can it last?" Upon hearing this, my shoulders trembled slightly, as weak and helpless as dodder grass. The imperial consort was even more disdainful. She thought I was afraid. Little did they know, I was thrilled, because the person who killed her was right before her eyes. Yet she remained completely unaware after the imperial consort returned to the palace. The emperor rarely summoned anyone to his chambers. On the few occasions he did, he came to my palace, and in recent days, the concubines who had been vying most fiercely for favor fell seriously ill one after another. Within less than half a month, 3 or 4 concubines had died. It seemed unrelated to the noble consort, but everyone knew she was making an example of them to warn others. For a time, the imperial consorts were all trembling with fear, not daring to use any more tricks to seduce the emperor. Afraid that they would be the next to die, and the noble consort, naturally, would not let me off easily because I had served the emperor the night before. When I went to pay my respects to the noble consort, I was slightly late. The noble consort took this as an opportunity to accuse me of disrespect and punished me by making me kneel under the scorching sun to reflect on my actions. I knelt for an entire day. When I returned to the palace, my knees were covered in bruises, aching with a piercing pain. Huaizhu shed tears of heartache, angrily speaking ill of the noble consort. As I listened, I could only find it laughable. Early the next morning, I forced myself to go to the Chenkuan palace and handed the newly made incense to eunuch Wang. He then carefully instructed me on how to use it and how much to apply, yet he said nothing about his own injuries. Every word he spoke was filled with genuine sincerity toward His Majesty. By evening, Huaizhu was applying the medicine to me when the emperor suddenly walked in. I was overjoyed. "Your Majesty, what brings you here?" I wanted to rise and bow, but then I remembered the wound on my knee and instinctively tried to cover it with my hand. However, the emperor was quicker. He gently moved my hand aside and, seeing the dark bruises on my knee, frowned deeply. "You're injured like this, yet you still brought me incense. Isn't that foolish?" I pursed my lips softly. "I was afraid Your Majesty wouldn't sleep well." "How foolish," the emperor sighed. "What would you do without me?" I blinked, nervously clutching his sleeve. "Why would there ever be a time without Your Majesty? Does Your Majesty no longer want me?" He straightened up, looking down at me with a deep, cold gaze. I shrank back, instinctively wanting to withdraw my hand, but the next moment, he took it in his own. He reached up to gather my loose hair, his voice carrying a gentle tenderness. "Yes, I want you." I beamed with joy and threw myself into his embrace. He took the ointment and personally applied it to my knees, with a cautious demeanor, as if afraid of hurting me. Naturally, I didn't notice the concubines, who had just been full of admiration moments ago, now looked cold and unmoved. After serving the emperor again, eunuch Wang, as usual, brought the fertility medicine, but this time, I noticed something different. This was a genuine pregnancy-inducing medicine. I feigned slight surprise on my face and looked toward the emperor, who was quietly watching me. "Your Majesty," the emperor smiled, "this medicine is for stabilizing the pregnancy. It's good for you." At this moment, I understood everything. Tears of joy welled up in my eyes. "This concubine will follow Your Majesty's wishes." The emperor was no fool. He naturally understood that I had long known the previous pregnancy-stabilizing medicine was fake, yet I had willingly taken it. He took the handkerchief and personally wiped the corner of my mouth. "Consort, you are truly foolish." After he left, my smile gradually faded. Looking at the already empty fertility medicine, I let out a soft, mocking laugh. People often say that the imperial family is the most heartless of all. The emperor, of course, knew that the feelings of the consorts in the harem toward him were always driven more by interest than by sincerity. Thus, my genuine sincerity and true feelings become exceptionally precious. The emperor bestowed his true love and deep affection upon the noble consort, yet, he could not refuse a woman who offered him her genuine love and deep devotion. Moreover, I am so well suited to his heart's desires, whether in bed or out of it. The emperor only grows more attentive to me now. He has even stopped the contraceptive soup, intending for me to conceive a royal heir. "Oh, noble consort, the man you love seems to have truly fallen for me. Your dream of a lifelong, exclusive love has long been shattered. Then I will make sure it is completely destroyed." I stopped taking the contraceptive medicine. Only a very few people knew about it. Yet, the noble consort had a huge fight with the emperor. Inside the Chenkuan palace, the palace attendants stood with their heads bowed on both sides. The imperial consort glared at the emperor with reddened eyes. Lu Changju, how could you stop her contraceptive soup? Do you really like her? I want to kill her. I want to kill her." As she spoke, she abandoned her usual gentleness, her face twisted with rage, and she actually tried to strangle me, but after taking just 2 steps, the emperor grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his embrace. "Arao, stop making a scene." Inside and outside the Chenkuan palace, there were palace attendants everywhere, in full view of everyone. The emperor did this to prevent the imperial consort from losing her composure in public. If word got out, it would be even more detrimental to the imperial consort. However, the imperial consort believed that the emperor was doing this to protect me. For a moment, she grew even more furious. She pushed the emperor away abruptly, pointed at him, and shouted angrily, "I'm being unreasonable, Lu Changju. Don't forget when you were assassinated in the hunting grounds, if I hadn't taken an arrow for you and hidden you in a cave, drinking dew and eating wild fruits, you would have died long ago. Back then, you promised me that we would be together for life, just the 2 of us. How could you betray me like this?" Before she could finish speaking, the imperial consort's tone suddenly faltered. She knew she had said the wrong thing. Everyone knew that the emperor had been saved by the imperial consort, and for years, the emperor had doted on her immensely because of it. For years, the imperial consort never mentioned the favor she had done back then, which only made the emperor cherish her even more. But now, by bringing it up so aggressively, she not only failed to make the emperor feel grateful for her kindness but also reminded him of his own pitiful and weak state at that time. Just as expected, the emperor's face suddenly darkened. He released the imperial consort's hand, and his eyes, once filled with affection and indulgence, now stared at her with a hint of scrutiny. Remaining silent, the Chenkuan palace fell into a deathly silence. The imperial consort trembled slightly all over. The next moment, she threw herself into the emperor's arms, tears streaming down her face like rain. "Your Majesty, I was just too afraid. That's why I misspoke. I'm too afraid of losing you, Your Majesty. These past few days, whenever I thought you might forget me, I was so scared I couldn't eat or sleep. That's why I said the wrong thing, Your Majesty." These words were spoken with such pitiful and endearing charm. The emperor glanced at her, ultimately softened by her tears, sighed, and drew her into his embrace, comforting her. "My dear consort, I will not blame you, nor will I forget you." His tone was as gentle as ever. The consort believed that the emperor truly did not mind. Little did she know that after she left, the emperor coldly summoned eunuch Wang. "Find out for me how many people the noble consort has planted in my Chenkuan palace, and what should be done once they are found out. Kill them." How cold and heartless. In the sweet days of the past, when the imperial consort sent people to the emperor's side, it was a constant expression of her care. Now, however, it is about planting spies to probe the emperor's heart. A rift has finally formed between the emperor and his consort. "It was not in vain that I personally delivered the news about the contraceptive decoction to Qi Palace." From that day on, the emperor continued to favor the imperial consort, but it was no longer exclusive favor. He often summoned other concubines to attend to him at night. This was a signal. The harem once again became lively as everyone vied for the emperor's favor. The imperial consort, fearing the emperor's anger, could only endure it. Day after day, she sent ginseng soup and tea snacks, trying to firmly capture the emperor's heart. But every time she went, I was already in front of the emperor. The emperor drank the medicinal soup I had personally prepared, smiling and praising my thoughtfulness. The imperial consort took out the red bean pastry and placed it on the table. Red bean pastry was the snack the two often shared when they first fell in love. The emperor couldn't help but show a hint of nostalgia, his gaze softening slightly as he looked at the imperial consort. He raised his hand to reach for it, but I stopped him. "Your Majesty has been diligently attending to state affairs lately, and the imperial physician advised against consuming greasy food. It would be better not to eat this pastry." Upon hearing this, the emperor paused his movement. While the imperial consort's expression turned unpleasant, concubine Yu is being too cautious. Eating a little wouldn't cause much harm. Yet the emperor withdrew his hand and simply said, "Forget it, noble consort. You can just leave the pastries here." But everyone knows the emperor won't eat them. The emperor, who was once completely devoted, is no longer solely following the noble consort's lead. The imperial consort understood this better than anyone. At that moment, a minister offered advice. I left the Qianquan palace together with the imperial consort on the palace path. The imperial consort glared at me with gritted teeth. Concubine, you don't get too pleased with yourself. The emperor's heart belongs to me. You're just a plaything. I will be the ultimate winner. I gently smoothed my hair, smiling nonchalantly. Imperial consort, who the winner is, you don't get to decide. The imperial consort stared at me with a dark expression for a moment before turning and leaving. Watching her retreating figure, I raised an eyebrow slightly. Don't let me down, imperial consort. The 7th day of the 7th month, a severe drought suddenly struck the northern region of the river, leaving the land barren and devoid of any vegetation. The emperor was so troubled by this matter that he could not sleep night after night. He rarely visited the harem anymore. One day, the imperial consort was attending to the emperor when she suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat. The emperor summoned the imperial physician, but the physician could find nothing wrong. However, for the next 3 days, the imperial consort often woke up in the middle of the night, her face gradually growing thinner and dark circles appearing under her eyes. The emperor was deeply worried, yet he did not know what to do. He could only squeeze out time to accompany her. At this moment, the imperial consort woke up again in a panic. A trace of impatience flickered across the emperor's brow, and her palace maid suddenly cried out, "Your Highness, I know you don't want His Majesty to worry about you, but you must tell him, in the inner palace, someone might be using witchcraft to harm you in secret. If you don't speak up, I fear you won't survive." Sorcery. This is a major taboo in the palace. Once discovered, it is a capital offense. The emperor was greatly alarmed upon hearing this. The imperial concubine then tearfully confessed that for the past few days, she had been dreaming of herself as if she were a wooden figure, being carved over and over again by a nail. The pain was excruciating. The emperor summoned a sorcerer, who divined, the person plotting against the imperial concubine is very close to her. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's gaze fell upon me. Yuhua Palace, Qa Palace, separated by only a single wall. Moreover, it is widely known that the noble consort and I have never gotten along. I do indeed have the suspicion of plotting against the noble consort. Inside the Tsuewei Palace, the noble consort sternly shouted, "Consort, you, do you know your crime?" Yet I was neither afraid nor fearful. What crime have I committed, Your Majesty? You used witchcraft to harm me, and you still refuse to admit it. The noble consort looked at the emperor with righteous indignation. Your Majesty, I implore you to order the immediate execution of consort you. For a moment, the emperor was speechless, merely gazing at me in silence. I looked up at him and suddenly asked, Your Majesty, do you believe in your concubine? The emperor narrowed his eyes slightly, his voice low. Consort you, if this matter is confirmed, even I cannot protect you. He did not believe me, nor will they protect me. I can only prove my own innocence, truly worthy of the ruthless imperial family. I sneered inwardly, yet on the surface, I looked at the imperial consort without a trace of fear. Consort, do you have any evidence? The consort sneered. Master Changming is a renowned master throughout the land. How could he lie? I also smiled. Of course, the master would not lie, but words alone are not proof. If I intended to harm the consort through witchcraft, there must be some object involved. Now, with nothing found, yet I am accused of plotting against the consort. I am naturally wronged. Upon hearing this, the consort glanced discreetly at a palace maid behind me. Seeing her nod, the consort smiled even more triumphantly. Then would you dare let me search your Jade Flower Palace? For a moment, all eyes fell upon me. Some were shocked and suspicious, some were smug, and some were gloating, but at that moment, I smiled, calm and composed. Of course I dare. Half an hour later, the person sent by the emperor walked out of the Yuhua Palace holding the wooden box in hand. A smile appeared at the corner of the noble consort's lips. The evidence is right here. Consort you. Do you still dare to deny it? I raised my eyebrow slightly. The noble consort then looked at the palace maids behind me and said coldly, Who among you knows about this? I'm giving you a chance to confess on your own. Otherwise, you'll all be beaten to death. As soon as these words were spoken, a palace maid suddenly fell to her knees with a thud. Noble consort, your majesty, spare my life. The use of witchcraft to harm the noble consort was entirely planned by Consort Yu alone. She was jealous of the noble consort's exclusive favor from your majesty and had long harbored resentment toward her. Upon hearing about witchcraft by chance, she sent someone to obtain a wooden figurine, intending to harm the noble consort. Both witnesses and evidence were present. For a moment, it seemed as though my involvement in using witchcraft to harm the noble consort had become an established fact. The emperor's expression darkened completely. Consort Yu, do you admit your guilt? I knelt on the ground, looking up at him with a calm expression. Your majesty, I have accompanied you for several months and have never been arrogant. I believe I have been devoted to your majesty, never seeking to stand out or speak ill of the noble consort. I do not know why the noble consort would falsely accuse me, nor do I understand why this palace maid would say such things. I beg your majesty to investigate thoroughly. As she spoke, the corners of her eyes turned slightly red, as if her heart had been utterly broken. The emperor was taken aback, but the noble consort said coldly, Consort Yu, even at death's door, you remain stubborn. If you truly did nothing, then what is this? With that, she threw the wooden box fiercely at me, but what rolled out of the wooden box was not the wooden figure she had arranged in advance. Instead, it was page after page of Buddhist scriptures. Everyone froze in shock. The emperor frowned deeply. Consort Yu, what is going on here? Upon hearing this, I seemed to completely break down, tears streaming down my cheeks as I cried pitifully and sorrowfully. Your majesty has been troubled by state affairs lately, and I, your humble consort, have been unable to help. I only wished to copy scriptures to pray for your majesty's blessings and for the well-being of the people, hoping that rain would fall. To ease your majesty's worries, I never intended to seek credit, but I truly do not understand why the noble consort would use this to falsely accuse me of plotting against her. As soon as these words were spoken, the palace maid who had just confidently pointed me out also broke down in tears, crying, Your Majesty, spare my life. It was the noble consort. She threatened my entire family's lives, forcing me to falsely accuse Consort Yu. The one who truly used witchcraft was the noble consort. The noble consort's face turned pale with shock. What nonsense are you spouting? The palace maid gritted her teeth and said, Your Majesty has recently favored Consort Yu, and the noble consort, consumed by jealousy, bribed Master Changming with silver to obtain wooden figurines carved with your majesty and Consort Yu, intending to vent her anger. If your majesty does not believe me, you may search for them. In less than half a moment, when the emperor's men returned, they held in their hands 2 wooden figures carved with the birth characters of the emperor and Consort Yu. The wooden figures were covered in deep scratches. The imperial consort collapsed to the ground in a state of disarray, crying out, I am wronged, your majesty. I have always been devoted to you. How could I possibly harbor resentment? The palace maid sneered coldly. Of course you resent his majesty. You resent him for not granting you the position of empress and for not giving you a lifetime of exclusive devotion. And Master Changming couldn't hold out either, admitting his guilt. Both witnesses and evidence were present. The imperial consort had no defense. The emperor stared fixedly at the consort's face, still as beautiful and delicate as before, but somehow, it grew more and more unfamiliar the longer he looked. He suddenly remembered the tragic death of noble Lady Wang from long ago. He couldn't bear to look at the bloody, mangled sight, yet the imperial consort could easily take action. She could kill noble Lady Wang out of jealousy. And of course, she could also kill Consort Yu out of jealousy, or even plot against herself out of resentment. Was such a person still the pure and kind-hearted beloved in his heart? I stood silently to the side, understanding the emperor's expression all too clearly. In his heart, he sneered. The emperor had forgotten the reason the imperial consort was so arrogant and disregarded human life was entirely due to his step-by-step indulgence and favor. The imperial consort cried out, claiming she was wronged, but after years of tyranny, she had already offended everyone, and no one would speak up for her anymore, and her only support, the emperor, also lost the last shred of patience with her today. Everyone present understood. The imperial consort was about to fall from grace. After the witchcraft incident, the emperor sealed off the news. All the palace servants who knew about this matter in the Changming temple and the noble consort's palace were executed. The noble consort was also stripped of her title and confined to the cold palace before being taken away. She stared at me with bloodshot eyes, as if wondering why everything she had meticulously planned had turned out this way. She used silver to bribe Master Changming and threatened the palace maid with her family's lives, forcing the two of them to join forces and frame me. It was supposed to be a foolproof plan. How could things have changed? But she didn't know that I had already noticed the palace maid's unusual behavior and had someone follow her every step of the way. Sure enough, she was caught secretly burying the witchcraft curse under the tree in my backyard. The palace maid, seeing that the matter had been exposed, confessed everything openly, so I had her family brought out and promised to help her leave the palace. The maid was overjoyed and put on a convincing act with me for the imperial consort to see. Now, at this moment I had thought the emperor would surely take the imperial consort's life. I think there is nothing more painful in this world than being killed by the one you love. Yet the emperor still could not bear to let her go. He spared her life. How truly devoted, however. Such deep affection completely vanished after he visited the imperial concubine in the cold palace once. Seeing his former beloved looking haggard and disheveled that day, the emperor's unconcealed disgust in his brow and his instinctive step back when the imperial concubine approached struck her heart like a heavy hammer. The past favor turned into a swift blade of lingering death at that very moment. It completely shattered the imperial concubine. The palace maid watching over her reported to me, "The imperial consort is gravely ill." I, by then, had become the empress, sitting in the position the imperial consort had longed for but could never attain. It was only right for me to visit her. Inside the cold palace, the imperial consort's hair was disheveled and draped over her shoulders, no longer maintaining the dignity of the past. She could only lie weakly in bed, with even the bedding emitting a foul odor. After the witchcraft incident, the imperial consort spent 3 years in the cold palace. During these 3 years, the former empress and the empress dowager passed away one after another. I was appointed as the empress and gave birth to a son and a daughter. I became the most esteemed woman in the imperial harem. The once highly favored imperial consort, who was once the center of attention, has long since become a discarded concubine in the cold palace. I don't even need to lift a finger myself. Those concubines she once trampled upon and humiliated will never let her off easily. The imperial consort has already been tortured until her body is covered in wounds. She is on the brink of death, but I have always kept her barely alive. She is not allowed to truly die. It's not the right time yet. That day, I had just entered the cold palace. The noble consort immediately looked over at the sound, and upon seeing me, her eyes ignited with endless hatred, as if she wanted to burn me to ashes. "Wretched woman, how dare you still come here?" I just smiled softly, my voice gentle. "Your Highness the imperial consort, how have you been lately?" The words imperial consort pierced her heart like a sharp blade. "You wretch, it's all your fault. You're the one who ruined me." She struggled to rush towards me from the bed, but she was slapped hard by the nanny. Blood trickled from the corner of the noble consort's mouth as she stared at me with a dazed, bewildered expression, her eyes filled with madness. "All of this is wrong. I clearly killed the female lead long ago. I should be the mistress of this world. Why was I defeated by a nobody like you? How is this possible? This must all be a dream." She muttered words that no one could understand. Everyone else thought she had gone completely mad, but I knew what she was saying. I dismissed the palace attendants and suddenly spoke up. "I once had a name." The imperial consort looked at me with confusion. I smiled and said, "It was Shinkia." "Imperial consort, do you remember?" "Shinkia," the imperial consort repeated, her face suddenly turning deathly pale. "Impossible. I killed Shinkia long ago. On the very first day I was appointed imperial consort, I investigated thoroughly. Shinkia was the legitimate daughter of the Shin family. You are her personal maid, you. Don't try to deceive me. I won't fall for it." She said it was impossible, but her voice trembled heavily at the end. I lowered my gaze and met her eyes, my expression as cold as death. "You killed the wrong person. You've been killing the wrong person all along." My name is Shinkia. I am the legitimate daughter of the Shin family and the female lead in this book world. This is what AU told me. AU is the little beggar I picked up from the roadside. I have been frail since childhood, so my mother sent me to my maternal family in Jiangnan to be raised. When I was sick and bedridden as a child, AU would tell me stories. She said that the world we live in is actually a book, and I am the heroine in it. In the future, I will save the emperor, be forcibly taken by him, and eventually live a beautiful life in the palace. But I don't want to live in the palace, nor do I want to be the heroine. I just want to live. After hearing this, Ayu smiled, took my hand, and said to me, "All right, Ayu will definitely protect you, miss." Later, a serious illness nearly took my life, and my mother invited a monk to exorcise the evil spirits. The monk said that my fate was too heavy, yet my life was too fragile, and before my coming-of-age ceremony, I needed to find a substitute to grow up safely. Ayu willingly became my stand-in overnight. She became Shinkia, the legitimate daughter of the Shin family, and I became Ayu later. My illness gradually improved. Half a month before my coming-of-age ceremony, I followed Ayu back to the Shin family. Ayu secretly told me that not long ago, a woman had saved the male lead on my behalf. That woman had already become the most favored imperial consort in the harem, so as the female lead, I probably wouldn't have much entanglement with the male lead anymore and would surely live a peaceful life. We were all very happy, yet disaster often strikes on the day when one is closest to happiness. Ayu died the day before my coming-of-age ceremony. She died in my place, I know, because the imperial consort was looking for Shinkia, the female lead, who would become her enemy in the future. Ayu clearly knew everything, yet she said nothing. She just gently wiped away my tears and said to me with a smile, "Miss, the female lead is dead. From now on, you are free." She wanted to use her death to buy my freedom, but she was wrong. From that day on, I was never free again. The sole purpose of my existence is revenge, whether it's entering the palace, learning the tricks of the trade, or pretending to be foolish and obedient. It's all for climbing higher, all for revenge. I want to seek justice for Ayu, who died a tragic death. The imperial consort stared at me in shock, unable to speak for a long while. After a moment, her expression gradually twisted into a grimace. She glared at me fiercely, wanting to say something, but in the next instant, she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and her gaze began to fade. "I'm about to die, and you tell me I killed the wrong person and loved the wrong person? Shinkia, how utterly heartless you are." I watched her pain and distress with cold eyes, suddenly asking, "Back then, you were already a noble consort, the most favored in the harem. The emperor was deeply devoted to you, wholeheartedly in love, yet you still felt such intense jealousy toward the so-called female lead. Even though I posed no threat to you whatsoever, you still chose to strike with lethal intent. Why?" The noble consort was taken aback for a moment. She looked up at me, her eyes bloodshot, filled with resentment and certainty. "Who made you the female lead? Even if you were weak at the time, one day you would become strong, and then you would surely snatch my emperor away from me. I just didn't want him to be taken by someone else. What did I do wrong? I did nothing wrong. The fault isn't mine, it's yours. Why didn't you just obediently die? Why did you have to live and stand in my way? Everyone who stands in my way deserves to die. How can the female lead be allowed to live, even if she did nothing? She is still a threat. I was only trying to eliminate the root of the problem. I meticulously planned everything. I wanted to become the most noble woman in this world. I did nothing wrong. I was so close to achieving it. Why did you have to stop me? The ones who deserve to die are you, Lu Changju. You have betrayed me." It turns out the reason was just that simple. Merely due to fear and cowardice, she effortlessly took away the most important person in my life. As I left the cold palace, I could still faintly hear the noble consort's furious screams. Fearing that I might be annoyed, the matron slapped her several times as soon as she entered the room. The noble consort lost all strength to curse and fainted. She had always looked down on the servants and palace maids, but now she was being bullied, beaten, and insulted by them at will. This taste for the imperial consort, it must be more unbearable than death, she cried out, demanding that I send her to her death. I did not agree, because it was not yet her time to die. Several more years passed in the blink of an eye. my son was appointed as the crown prince. After the investiture ceremony, the emperor went to the palace of his latest favorite, a young beauty from Jiangnan. It was said that she bore some resemblance to the young noble consort. Upon hearing this, I could only feel an overwhelming sense of absurdity. The emperor would rather favor a fake imperial consort than see the living one. It was clear that he truly despised her, yet no one expected that the imperial consort, mustering all her strength, would escape from the cold palace, rush before the emperor, and stab him through the heart with a single thrust. Everyone was stunned. The imperial consort, however, laughed maniacally. "Die, all of you." Then she plunged the blood-stained knife into her own heart with all her strength. She grabbed the emperor's hand and rasped, "Lu Changju, in this palace, only I love you. We must be together forever." But the emperor she adored violently shook off her hand and cried out to me for help, "Save me." But in the next second, the imperial consort, with a burst of strength from who knows where, pulled out the knife and stabbed the emperor several more times. Blood gushed from her mouth, her eyes filled with madness. "You cannot love anyone else. You are mine alone. I gave up everything for you. I wanted to defy fate for you. You cannot leave me." Until the emperor's breath was completely gone, she then seemed to close her eyes peacefully. Everyone was stunned by the scene before them, until I shouted angrily, "What are you standing there for? Go call the imperial physician." But everyone looking at the emperor lying on the ground, with his heart pierced, knew very well that the emperor was beyond saving. The palace attendants were in chaos, yet no one dared to move the body on the ground. I watched coldly as the two tightly clasped hands, a faint sneer flashing in my eyes. "My dear imperial consort, all these years, I have been preserving your life with ginseng, all for this very day, to witness lovers turning against each other. There is no better spectacle in this world than this. So, rest assured, I will ensure that you and the emperor share the same quilt in life and the same tomb in death. Praying that you two remain deeply in love for all eternity." The emperor has passed away. I supported the crown prince in ascending the throne, becoming the youngest empress dowager in the dynasty. I presided over court and listened to state affairs. Yet I did not cling to power. When the young emperor was capable of controlling the court, I returned the governance to the sovereign, became the idle empress dowager in the harem. But my spirit grew increasingly unwell, and the Western painter finally painted Au based on my description very much alike. It's as if I've seen her again. I have grown old, yet Au remains as young as ever. I wonder if she will recognize me. Perhaps I'm getting old. I often dream. One night, I dreamed of the grapevines at my maternal grandmother's house in Jiangnan from my childhood. They were planted by my father in the summer. Au and I would sit on the swing, and with a gentle reach, we could pick the big, sweet grapes. Au always feeds me first, her eyes curving into a smile as she says, "Miss, it's so sweet." I eat the grape she feeds me, and it is indeed sweet. After swallowing, I correct her. "Au, I'm not the young lady now you are." Au gently rocks my swing. "No one knows, miss, I just want to call you that." I blinked. "Sister Au, from now on, call me Aya." Okay. That was the first time I called her sister. She was stunned for a moment, and the next second, an even brighter smile bloomed on her face. "All right." A gentle breeze blows softly, the swing gently swayed. I just wanted to doze off, but then the swing suddenly stopped. I opened my eyes to look and saw Au standing at the door, waving to me. "Aya, let's go pick flowers." I felt uneasy, shaking my head. "No, Au, let's just stay at home." But Au ignored me. She walked straight outside, and I wanted to call her back, but she refused to turn back. "Yeah, sister, wait for me. I want to hold your hand." I grew anxious, stood up to chase after her, and called her name with a hoarse voice, but she never paid me any attention, nor did she ever look back. She doesn't want me anymore. This thought fermented in my heart. It gripped my heart tightly. The next second, I suddenly woke up. Only then did I realize my face was cold, covered in tears, gazing out in a daze. It's the palace walls of red bricks and green tiles. No grapevines, no swing. Yeah, there's no Au. Au has been gone for a long time. I've known it for many years. But now, at this very moment, this thought strikes my heart like a heavy hammer. It hurts and feels suffocating. My consciousness gradually blurred. In a daze, I seemed to see Au, still looking just as she did in the past, but this time, she didn't leave me as she had in my dreams. Instead, she reached out her hand to me with a smile on her face. She said to me, "Miss, AU has come to take you home." I was taken aback. Look back, I found myself back under the grapevine again, with the trellis laden with bright red grapes. Not far away is my little swing swaying back and forth in the wind. I smiled. Without hesitation, he took her hand. We're going home. That's all for today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. See you in the next video.